Hello and welcome to our virtual mini retreat where I'm going to be sharing with you 3 ways that are going to help you to step more fully into your power, disentangle from some of the family drama and tension that you may be experiencing as we're moving into the holiday season, and be able to really step into your role as your lost little one's mother a little bit more through all of the different family challenges and dynamics and frustrations that might make that feel really hard to do right now. So I just want to thank you for joining with me in this time. I know that even just the idea of letting yourself settle into this space where you let yourself just really check in a little bit about what you need to get through the season can feel almost a little bit anxiety provoking in and of itself sometimes. But I just really want to reassure you that this hour that we're going to spend together is going to be really gentle, really easy, and all that I'm doing is just really guiding you through some powerful questions that you can ask yourself to help you get really more connected to your own truth and your own power, and to know really what the next right step is for you that you need for your heart and your family and your baby's memory to feel as okay as possible right now, right? Because we all know that as you're navigating the holidays after the loss of your baby, this time of year it's brutal. It is brutal. And I have certainly been where you are. For those of you who are not familiar with my story, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm the creator of the Love and Loss Project. And that work really became a calling or a passion to me, or something I felt compelled to do after I lost my little girl, Nora, when she was just 1 day old. So even though I had worked as a therapist for about a decade, and in the helping profession for about a decade before I lost her, I still found it was so unbelievably isolating and so unbelievably humbling and challenging and agonizing to have to really move through life after loss. So it has become really important to me to offer these kinds of spaces to you, that you know that somebody else really gets it and that you're not just being crazy or you're not just not coping well, right? Which is sometimes something that people kind of from the outside might say to us. But I just really want to share with you some things that have really made a difference for me, and that I really believe that if you follow along with me today, this is really going to shift some powerful things for you and change some of the dynamics in your relationship. So here's what I want you to do to get started. Make sure that you have a pen and paper handy and turn off your phone so that you can really give yourself this time and honor your decision to be here with me today and to honor your experience in this way with me. Good. So the first way that I want to offer you, and the first question that I want to ask you to think about, is when you think about whatever that gathering or event is that's causing you a little bit of stress or anxiety already, even as you think about it. I'm just going to tilt this so you can see my little sidekick a little bit better. Even as you're thinking about that, which event is that for you that's kind of weighing on you, that's causing you a bit of stress? What's that one that you're dreading? Right. And quite possibly you have some faces coming to mind right now of who especially you're really experiencing some tension, or who has really potentially disappointed you. And I think a lot of us have really been there, right? When we go through the loss of our baby and it just doesn't get a whole lot bigger from that, it seems really obvious that family and friends should be able to step in a little bit closer to us. They should understand at least some of the magnitude of what we're going through. And it's this, unfortunately, really painful and yet really common occurrence I have found, both in my own life and with the clients that I work with, that often that is just not the case. So, as we move into the holiday time, that can start to create a lot of hurt and a lot of anxiety. You might find that those people in your life have that same kind of pressure or expectation that somehow you're just supposed to be able to move through this season as you maybe would have before you had lost your little one. They expect you to just be able to fulfill all your usual expectations, all the usual duties that you maybe did before, and to essentially go back to just being your easygoing, fun to be around, happy to participate self. And you and I both know it is just so much more complicated than that. That might be so far away from where you really are right now. So just know that I get that. I've been there too. So here's the question that I want to ask you. When you think about that particular event or that particular gathering that's starting to stress you out a little bit right now, what is your reason for going? What is your reason for participating in that? Write it down. What is your reason for going to the event that is causing you stress? And I know that for most of us, sometimes the first thing that usually comes up is really something like, well, I have to. This is just the way it is. I always go there for Christmas, or they always come here for Christmas. That's just the way that it is. But I want you to really get a little more curious about what that is about for you, really. And oftentimes, what tends to come up when I'm talking to people one-to-one and we kind of dig into that question a little bit more is sometimes this feeling of, I don't want people to be mad at me, and I don't want to create drama, I don't want to create conflict. And in some ways, it's just easier to give so-and-so what they want than it is to dig in my heels on this. And it just reminds me of, I was talking to this really incredible client about a couple weeks ago, and she is this, really incredible woman who is that really neat blend of what I would say is both soft but also quite strong, right? She's somebody that can be quite very caring, very gentle, but also like she's a smart girl and she knows kind of where she stands on things. And we've been doing some work around boundaries and helping her to just kind of protect her own baby's memory a little bit more and protect her own kind of health and well-being. And she had decided that she was going to change up the family traditions. So usually what would happen around that time of year as she moved towards Thanksgiving is everybody would come to her house and she would usually host the Thanksgiving dinner. And usually she was happy to do that. But this year, that didn't quite feel right. So her and her husband talked and they decided that really they were just going to opt out this year. They were just going to gracefully and kindly let his family know, because those were the ones that usually came over, that they weren't going to do this year. Everyone was really welcome to go and do what they needed to do without them, but thank you, but they were going to not participate. And that went really well between her and her husband until it got to the point that he was sharing that information with his parents. And I think you can kind of guess what happened. So it's not exactly that they freaked out, but they let him know that they were not happy about that. And they let him know that that actually was quite disappointing for them, and they weren't really totally okay with that. And when we think about it, I would say that kind of what I would call pushback, right? Where people don't just kind of give you the green light and say, oh, of course, that makes perfect sense that you would need this. Really, please, the priority this year is that you just take as good care of each other and yourselves as you can. I totally get that. Do what you need to do, right? That stuff doesn't feel like rocket science. And yet for most people, there's pushback. And when we think about it, especially when it comes to the holiday time, there is usually years and years, if not decades upon decades, of tradition and expectation, and all of those both said and unsaid family expectations and family rules. This is what we always do. And people tend to really freak out when we go to change some of that stuff. So this is kind of what they were experiencing, was this bit of pushback. And so her husband had come back to her and basically said, you know, they're not happy and this doesn't really feel good. All right, I'm going to free Sasha. Goodbye. Okay, so, and what she realized was that even though she was really okay with holding that ground a little bit more, her husband at this point in time was actually not, right? In some ways he wanted to be able to do that with her, but that was just not really the reality of really that kind of boundary or new tradition that he truly felt ready or comfortable to uphold. And so as we were moving through, you know, really some of that resentment and frustration and kind of, you know, that kind of grit in your teeth kind of feeling when you're like, like I'm actually kind of mad that I still have to go and participate in this after I really tried to be both kind and firm that that's not what we needed. This is not okay for us. So understandably so, right? She's kind of trying to process and unpack all of that. And what I encourage her to think about is really that question of why are you going really? Because when we got right down to it, it's not that she was going for them. She was not going, even though she was a bit nervous, of course, that they would think badly about her, even though she was a bit worried that they were going to maybe talk about her behind her back or hold this against her. When we really kind of broke it all down, even though there was some of those fears that might be quite valid, right? We know that sometimes that's really just the reality of how those people operate. You know who those people are for you in your life. You know sometimes those fears are a little bit real. You know who's talking about you and who's not, right? We all know that. Even though she was aware of that stuff, and that hurt her a little bit, and that was a little bit stressful, at the end of the day, when we really kind of moved through it, her bottom line of why she was going was for her husband. Because she recognized, and as we kind of talked through this process, she was able to identify that really it was absolutely 100% for him. She was able to see and be compassionate to, he just really was not able to shift some of those dynamics in his family just yet, right? And that's pretty understandable and human in lots of ways, right? Often there's like 25, 30 years, 35 years of habit and expectation and patterns that we play out in our family. So even though for her, being on the scene for maybe, let's say, 5 years with that family, it was actually easier for her to change those dynamics and even being willing to change those dynamics than it was for him. And so she moved into this place of owning, I have a choice here. I still have a choice to go or not, to participate or not. We looked at her other options, right? She could have made herself unavailable. She could have gone to her family's. She could have just stayed home. She could have faked sick the day of, right? When you really look at it, there's lots of options of how you could possibly bow out of that if that really is your truth. But what she realized was that her bottom line was that she felt that she wanted to go for him. And when she was able to own that, the whole energy of that situation flipped. Instead of feeling like she was almost being victimized or bullied by them into participating into this, she was able to step back and really own her own adulthood in this and say, I do have a choice in how I participate or not. And my answer is yes. And I'm going for him. I'm going for my guy. And when she was able to step into that place of strength and truth and love, because that's what that decision was about, I'm going out of love for my man right now, and because he always has my back, and here's one moment where I can be compassionate to that kind of human part of him that just isn't ready to set that boundary with them, I can support him with love. And I'm making the choice to do that. I could choose not to, but I'm making the choice to go. So, when you reflect on your own situation, what is your reason for going really? Because I want to encourage you to disentangle from some of those disempowering, limiting, victim feeling kind of stories that we tell ourselves of I'm going because they're making us go. No, they're not. Are they pressuring you? Hell yes. Are they possibly being jerks about it? Most likely, right? But at the end of the day, we are making a choice. So let yourself really look at which one really truly feels right to you. And when we move out of this place of kind of autopilot or just kind of going with the flow without stopping to really check in about what that's about for us, that story of feeling like I'm going because they're making me just builds and builds and builds and builds. And when we can look at it that I'm going, and maybe your own truth is, I'm going because I'm not ready to set those boundaries with them. Or I'm going because I really just don't feel ready to deal with any more hard conversations this year than I have to. Whatever that is for you is totally fine. And whatever you need to do to get through this time of year as you're moving through grief through the holidays, please just give yourself permission to do that. But please also acknowledge that that is a choice. Bring your power back. Own your reason for doing this. So, the next thing that I want to offer you is to flip the question around from who do I need those people to be, right? To who do I want to be through this? And let me explain a little bit more about what I mean from this. So, when we get into this place, and I know it is real, I know it is absolutely valid, I know that you are not blowing it out of proportion or imagining stuff that is not there, because believe me, I have lived it too. I know how awful it feels to feel like you are almost being judged or shamed or pushed away when we're going through the worst stuff in our life and we are unavoidably just vulnerable and we're not really ourselves right now, right? That is awful, awful. And so I think one of the things that happens is that we start to get into this place of, I'm so mad at so-and-so, right? I'm so hurt and I'm so offended at so-and-so because they're not doing this, they're not doing this. Maybe they said this awful thing. Maybe they just change the topic every time. Maybe they're just somehow not really being the grandparents or family members or whoever that is to my lost little one right now. And instead, I want you to flip that question from who do I want them to be? Because as you've probably already experienced, you've probably made a few attempts by now to try to engage them in a different way, and it's just not working, right? Let me know if I'm alone on that. I've certainly been there where you're like, okay, let me come at it from this angle then. Okay, okay, maybe if I word it more like this, right? And there's just sometimes those times where it's like hitting a brick wall. We get nowhere except for feeling more hurt and more frustrated. Sometimes, right? Sometimes that creates shifts with people, but I think we all have those people in our lives where it doesn't. So instead of really picturing, when you picture that holiday event that you're talking about going to, And you're picturing about how you want to step into that room and what you feel like you should be able to experience there. And I'm with you. You should be able to experience feeling like your lost little one is truly held in that space as well. Feeling like people really get the depth and the reality of how difficult the road that you're walking truly is. That compassion, that empathy, you do deserve that. Absolutely, right? That's a big reason of why I do this work and I talk about this topic so much, because nobody else, or there's not enough people who are talking about this. And it can end up feeling, one of the things I hear from people all the time is how, because there's sometimes a lack of acknowledgement and a lack of empathy and support, it can almost make us start to really question, am I doing something wrong here? And it starts to feel almost a little bit embarrassing or shameful of, oh, I'm still impacted. I'm still not okay, still, right? And everybody else seems to think I should be. And it can activate all kinds of icky shame and self-attack, and even more kind of depression and hurt in all of this, or even more anxiety. So what I want you to flip it from is, instead of who do I need them to be, who do you want to be through this? Because if, and bear with me a little bit when I say this, because I know this might be a bit hard to hear, if your little one was still with you, if they were there with you present day, you would take full responsibility for looking at how you want to carry them into the room with you, for looking at how you want to introduce them to their family members, for looking at how you want them to be treated and taken care of. And when our babies become invisible, and when our grief becomes exclusionary, that is so hard to do, right? But what I want to encourage you to think about is, how do you want to experience that space? How do you want your little one's memory to be experienced there? And how can you take 100% responsibility for doing that thing without it being a requirement for anyone else to participate in any way or form? Because that's kind of where we lose our power again, right? It's okay for me to honor my baby in this space as long as his mom seems to approve. Why? You would not think of it that way if your little one was here in your arms. You would not think it was okay for them to have a place at the table as long as your father-in-law thought that they had a full right to be there, right? So one example of this, in practical terms, might be, instead of waiting for your other family to acknowledge the fact that you've been through an absolute shit year, and that the reality is that you are missing a family member, the whole room is missing a family member right now. Instead of waiting for other people to voice that, to express that, or validate that truth, people are moving furniture around in the hotel room that I'm in right now, so I apologize for some of the noise that you're hearing. Instead of waiting for other people to do that or to co-create that space for you, check in a little bit. What do you want that to look like? How do you want to carry your little one with you through this holiday season? Who do you want to be, both for your little one and for yourself? What do you want that to look like? Write down anything that comes to mind. How do you want this time of year to look like between you and your little one? Between you and your partner? Between you and your own experience here, your own experience of heartbreak and grief? Who do you want to be through that? And I don't know about you, but the word that kind of comes up for me is really acknowledgement, right? I want that acknowledgement. And the reality is that other people quite possibly may not be equipped or prepared to do that for you, even if you're kind of leading them through it. But how can you do that for yourself? So, for instance, what some women do is they take a family photo for their holiday Christmas cards, for example, and they include either a feather or a symbol or their baby's ultrasound picture or something that just really symbolizes the place that their lost little one has in their family. And they get those photos done and they send that out, and that is just an action of that mama taking responsibility for creating space for her little one in the family and holding that during this time of year. For other women, they've done things like they've gotten ornaments with their baby's name on it or some kind of phrase that reminds them of their baby, and they give one of those ornaments to each of their family members in memory of their baby. Other people have said, instead of giving us gifts, we would like you to donate to this cause in memory of our lost baby. And when we can look at just how some of this dynamic kind of shifts the power, that can really, really become some powerful stuff. Because at the end of the day, I would say that we just really don't have control over what other people do or don't do. Even in those moments where we can ask them for what they need, I would say, in my experience, it's kind of hit and miss whether people really step up to that plate or don't. And if you're watching this, and if you're here with me right now, I would be willing to guess that you have also had experiences where you've kind of tried your best and people still don't totally step into that place with you. And that is due to the third way that I want to offer you to take back some of your center this year, some of your truth this year, and take off some of that weight of some of the extra hurt that you're having to carry right now, which is remembering that it is not personal. And I know on one hand that phrase in and of itself might kind of create a little bit of a reaction for you and might kind of sting a little bit, and I get that. But here's kind of what I want to explain what I mean by that. I think the reality is that there are some people that even though they might be good people, right, in lots of ways, even though you might have even been close to them before that this happened, I think the truth is that there are just some people who are not really equipped with the skills or the knowledge or the emotional intelligence that it takes to really be able to walk beside us through something as traumatic and devastating and excruciatingly vulnerable as the loss of a baby. I think that there's a lot of people that just really aren't able to go to that level of real, to go to that level of the depths of this. And I sometimes almost picture it like this. I had seen this quote somewhere, and it had said, if you can't swim in the deep end with me, then get out of my pool. And I love that phrase because I think it just kind of validates a little bit of this experience, and that when we are going through heartbreak, when we are going through trauma, when we are going through the loss of our little one, we are forced into the deep end of the pool where our feet don't touch and the water often feels like it's hitting above our heads, and we're kind of just having to work really hard to keep ourselves breathing there. And I think that there really is just a lot of people in this world that are not able to swim at that depth, neither in your life and through your experience of their grief, and not in their own either. And I think that that is the key distinction there. And this is why I say I don't believe that it's personal. I believe that often when we're kind of coming up against somebody that really is disengaged from us, non-responsive from us, kind of almost, takes a few steps away and gives us the cold shoulder whenever we maybe express anything a little bit more real or open about what we're going through really. I would challenge you to just right now think about who those people are for you in your life. Maybe it's one person that comes to mind who has really disappointed you, who has really made you feel rejected and hurt. Who is that person? Write down their name. And when you think about that person, I want you to just kind of do a little bit of a scan. When you think about how that person interacts with the other relationship in their lives, with the other people in their lives, and even just how they move through life in general, would you say that that person is someone who swims in the deep end? I'm going to guess not. I'm going to guess not. And I'll share an experience, that happened to me personally, where I was having, one of those days where I just felt like my skin was paper thin. I just felt raw, and I just felt like I was on the verge of tears, kind of by anything could set me off, right? And let me know if you've been there too. I'm sure that you have. So it's just having one of those days where I just felt exposed and raw. And I broke down crying, which is not my comfort zone, for those of you that can maybe relate to that as well. I just had one of those moments where I had no control, and I burst out crying in front of somebody that, I hadn't really done that around them before. And here's what happened. That person kind of asked me a few questions about like what's going on, what just happened. And then they pretty much avoided me like the plague, right? We were spending a number of days together. And for the rest of the time, they really just avoided being alone with me. They avoided time with me. They really just kept their distance. And that felt like such a sucker punch, right? That felt so hurtful. Because here I am, obviously going through some hard stuff. And instead of getting curious about that, instead of stepping in closer and saying, what's going on? What do you need? Tell me more about what's happening for you. Show me how I can help. Instead of any of those kinds of empathetic responses, they backed away. And I think you've possibly experienced that feeling too. And I had to kind of stop and ask myself about how I wanted to handle that, because I was hurt. And then when I really looked at it, what I realized was, and this is kind of a bonus question they'll ask you to think about, when you think about those relationships with the people who have hurt you, what is your goal? What is the goal? How is that you want that relationship with that person to really look and feel? And when I thought about that, what was my goal? What I realized was, while I would really love to be able to feel really close and really connected with this person, in fact, it's really hard for me to spend time with people if we're not going to be able to swim in each other's deep end, right? Because obviously as a therapist, that's the part of life I value, right? That's a part of life that I feel like is real and has meaning. And I don't want to just talk surface level all the time, right? That's kind of how I operated in my world. That's probably just my personality even before my loss, right? But when we go through a loss, we don't even have a choice. We're stuck in the deep end. And when I looked at that, that person does not swim in the deep end anywhere in their own life. In fact, you can probably think about the person in your life and notice, what are the things that they do to avoid swimming in the deep end of their own life? Think about that. When you look at how they move through their days and move through their weeks and how they interact with the people around them, how do you see them avoiding that kind of deeper connection, that deeper reflection? Are they somebody that really asks themselves real questions? Do they get real anywhere? And I'm going to guess that they don't. So that's what I realized was the case for this person. We essentially just have different values. And we're probably not going to meet up on that. So what I realized was that I had to just kind of take that sharp knife out of my heart and put it on the table and say, that wasn't personal. That person can't do that in their own life. So how on earth would I be able to expect them to be able to go to that place with me? They don't go to that place in their own experiences of hurt in their life. How on earth could I be expecting this person to really hold space for mine when that is just not something that they do? And when you think about it, for that person in your life to actually be able to make that change, for them to actually be able to develop that willingness, that capacity to step closer to you in your moment of need, that would change everything in that person's life. Their marriage would change, their work relationships would change. That ripple effect would blast throughout their entire lives. So when we really think about it, and I use this phrase, often, but it's kind of like going to McDonald's and trying to order filet mignon. They just don't have it to give you. And we sometimes get kind of stuck in this trap to say, if that person was truly a good friend of mine, if that person truly cared about me, if that person truly felt like the loss of their grandbaby or family member was important, they would be willing to try to go there. They would try to figure that out. They would Google search what to say, right? They would do something that would show me some kind of proof of effort or interest or care. But when you really think about it, they've probably had 1,000 other opportunities in their life long before they even really met you, where they had been called upon by something that says, oh, my computer screen's just shutting off here, so I just want to make sure. Oh, there we go, we're good. They've probably had 1,000 invitations in their life to go real, to go deep, to access that kind of underbelly of the human experience where, yes, it is gut-wrenching and terrible and awful, but that's also the only place where authenticity and connection and truth live. They've probably had 1,000 opportunities to do that before you even got pregnant. And they didn't do that. So I want you to really take that pressure off of your shoulder, and really I'm going to invite you to retire that idea, that mistaken belief that says somehow they are not giving me the care or consideration that I deserve right now because they have somehow deemed my loss to be unworthy, or they have somehow deemed me to be unworthy of their care and attention right now. And instead, I want you to just really hold this idea in your mind. They just don't swim in the deep end. And then when we ground ourselves in that truth, then it totally changes the dynamic of how we walk into that space, of how we sit down at that table, of how we enter into conversation with them. Because instead of going into that room with this feeling of, oh, I'm kind of hopeful, part of me is really hoping that they are going to be nicer right now, or screw them, they're such a jerk, they're so horrible, I can't believe we're even here today, right? Like, look at them being horrible, and you're waiting. Do you ever find yourself in that place where you're almost just like waiting for them to make you angry? Right? I think we've all kind of been there, because you know it's coming, because you know that just like every other time that you've kind of wanted to be able to have a little more care from them, they've disappointed you. So here's how to do it differently this year. Release them and yourself from that expectation that they're going to be able to do this for you. And this sounds strange to put it this way, but when we really look at it, what this really means is that you're accepting somebody for who they are. And that doesn't mean I accept them for who they are, and so now we're going to be BFFs. Not at all. Now I accept them for who they are, and so I know they're just going to chit chat about the decorations or their work life or whatever it is, or the other grandkids or whatever it is that's going on for them, and that's it. So, in that is really this idea, the bottom line, that you do not need to wait for anybody else to deem this heartbreak as worthy and important and meaningful and huge, absolutely huge. And what this all really allows us to do, which is, I think, one of the biggest tasks or challenges and risks that there is when we've gone through the loss of a baby, what we're really talking about at the most basic level is how do you keep your heart more open when everything is making it want to just move into self-protect mode or move into anger mode where it just kind of gets hard and closes in. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. And that was truly one of the guiding things that I think made the biggest difference for me as I was navigating some of the earlier stages of losing Nora, was I knew that I did not want to become just this kind of hard shell of who I used to be. I did not want to become somebody that was just bitter and angry and mad at the world. And so right now, you're probably going to have a number of people that almost kind of throw you that rope to say, here's an opportunity that you can get into the dirt, right? Here's an opportunity that you come wrestle with me. Here's an opportunity for you to be mad. And I think the more that we just really step away from that to say, I'm going to choose to not really engage. I'm going to choose to not really be a part of that drama. I'm going to choose to not tell myself what a horrible person they are right now, which doesn't mean that you have to go and invest any time with them, right? Or even if you're going to that place, you're not necessarily trying to invest in your relationship with them. You might be there for a really different reason. So own what that is. Remind yourself that this is not personal, and focus on who you want to be. Now, if you would like a little bit more support to do that, or if you would like to kind of go through some of the specific challenges that maybe you have going on in your world right now, then know that I am here for you. So I know this time of year is absolutely brutal, so I've decided to open up a little bit more space in my calendar to meet with people who would like just a little bit more guidance, or just to kind of move through some of their situation with a little bit more care and reflection and support. So let me know if that feels like a good fit for you. Feel free to email me and we can find a time to connect. I'm going to do as many of these sessions as I possibly can over the next few weeks. So I think that would be wonderful, and I hope I get to work with you guys. All right, take care.